Enjoy your meeting.
All right, I think we are set. Welcome everyone who's watching this. I am Shannon Karafanda, Deacon in Full Connection, serving at Cornerstone in the North Georgia Annual Conference. And I have with me Dr. Margaret Crain. She is a Deacon in Full Connection in the Northern Illinois Conference, and she has been Professor of Christian Education and is now Professor Emeritus at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary in Evanston, Illinois, one of our United Methodist seminaries. She was ordained a Deacon in Full Connection in 1997 in our North Georgia Annual Conference, one of the first classes that we had. And welcome, Margaret. We're happy to have you here to share your knowledge about the Order of Deacons. You've written a book about the Order of Deacons, and it has been very helpful, I know, to me as well as other deacons as they continue to explain their call, explain how they're living out word, service, compassion, and justice in connecting the church and the world. So I wanted to ask you a few questions to start off with about the beginnings of the order. When the General Conference in 1996 decided to create a new order of clergy, the Order of Deacons, can you tell us what the reaction was in the North Georgia Conference and how that began to take shape over the next year leading up to your ordination?
Well, I can't speak for all my colleagues there, but I know the emails were flying around like crazy. We were pretty excited that this had happened, although there were people who did not feel called to be ordained and were uncomfortable with moving from the lay status of the diaconal minister to ordination as a deacon. And so there was a lot of conversation that went on about that, but many of us felt that we really were finally moving into the identity that we already felt, which was that called, set apart status of ordination. And so it felt like really good news. We had come close in 1992 with Dr. Mary Elizabeth Moore helping particularly to express the theology that related to the order of deacon and the ministry of deacons. And so we were excited. I was excited to write my papers for the board and frustrated because I wasn't really sure anyone ever read them before my interview. But of course they were brilliant, you know. So a lot of us were approved for ordination. It was a big class. I think you said you've seen the picture, Shannon, of all of us. And when I look around the connection now at where people are who were part of that class, I know that we have offered a lot to the church, and that's exciting to me. So it was more than anything else, it was a living into the identity or an opportunity to fully express the identity that many of us already claimed in our hearts.
Can you tell me about the first Board of Ordained Ministry and the ordination service in 1997?
Well, it was in Dalton, and it was exciting. There was a lot of talk about whether we'd be able to have any family up on the stage with us, and eventually all that worked out kind of the way we wanted it to. And it was a great day. It was very, very moving. Although I have to say that when I was consecrated as a diaconal minister, that was my moment of feeling the lifetime commitment and the blessing of the connection, the blessing of the bishop, the calling down of the Holy Spirit. Almost more so than the actual ordination. Again, it was just the fullness of the identity came to fruition at that moment of ordination. But it was a great time, and I'm still just thrilled to think about all the people that were there with me at that point. Debbie Fox continues to be a close friend. Cynthia Wilson continues to be a close friend. Sharon Ruby, there were a lot of us. It was a great day.
Tell me about the early days for the Order of Deacons. What were challenges or surprise benefits? How did you start to gather yourself as an order distinctively from diaconal ministers or the Order of Elders? How did that start to take shape?
Well, I think there were a couple things that were going on. One was that we had to figure out how we were going to continue to relate to our brothers and sisters who did not feel called to ordination but were diaconal ministers. And in most places around the church, I don't mean just North Georgia, but most places, we all continued to meet together, and we continued to have the national gatherings periodically that the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry organized for us. And of course, there was also the deaconess, which as another lay office in the church, but that is associated with the General Board of Global Ministries. There are a lot of us called to the diaconate one way or another, but we each relate to the denomination differently. So there was that to figure out. And then there was also just to work out the day-to-day differences in one's place of appointment. In my case, I was serving in a congregation, a large congregation with a large staff, Peachtree Road United Methodist Church, and the first thing that happened that needed interpretation for the rest of the staff was they said, oh, okay, great, we'll put you into the rotation of presiding at communion. And I did it once, and then I said, no, this is not right. I can't do this. And so I had to explain why. That this is not part of the description of the responsibilities of deacons, that we assist elders, but we don't preside. And that was a little complicated, painful, I don't know what to call it all. In my particular case, through my years of ministry, now 20 years as a deacon, I've always served alongside a lot of elders. So there was never a good justification for me to need permission to preside. It is, of course, part of the Book of Discipline now that bishops may authorize deacons in certain settings to preside over the sacraments. And I think that that's very important because we have so many deacons who are out in the world in places that they have gained trust, gained interest, become part of very ministry with very vulnerable people. And those people need to be authorized for sacraments. We don't need to act as if sacraments and God's grace are scarce. In fact, God's grace is abundant and should be available in a lot of different places. So I'm hoping that the bishops are going to continue to honor that piece of the discipline and see the possibilities for more and more deacons to be authorized to offer the sacraments to people. So those are a couple of things that we kind of had to deal with as we got started. Right.
What opportunities has the order given to individuals as well as the church and the kingdom? Where has this kind of given us a fullness as we step into this new order?
Well, let me give an example of somebody here in northern Illinois that I think is an exciting example. This young woman is a policeman, a policewoman in the Chicago police. And of course, there's a lot of controversy around what's happening with our police, but we have many fine officers as well as perhaps a few who have gotten confused about their work. But she had been asked to do some sort of chaplain things in the police department, meeting sometimes with officers who had been wounded and their families, and sometimes with victims who had been hurt one way or another, or families of persons who were murdered, just a wide variety of things, but acting in a chaplain's role. And we have now ordained her. We have a United Methodist ordained person who is a Chicago police officer acting as a chaplain. I think it is so exciting that the church is there. And she's not just there as an outsider, she's an insider. She's part of that system, and she has earned a place there, a true place there. So those are the kinds of things that we've got deacons out there doing now that an elder simply could not be doing. And it extends the church so much over what it has traditionally been. I think that if the church is going to really continue to be viable, I even think viable, we're not dying next year or anything, but we're in trouble. Then we need to make a difference in the world. We can't simply sit in our buildings and have wonderful worship. We got to make a difference in the world, and that's what I see deacons doing. Just the most amazing, courageous, creative ministries that extend our denomination out into many, many places.
Great. Wow. So tell me about the addition of the words compassion and justice to the role of deacon, and what does that really mean for the order? How do people see themselves in compassion and justice? Sometimes our bishop jokes that not that elders aren't called to compassion and justice, it's just that deacons live into that role.
Well, compassion and justice are the work of all baptized Christians. So we don't own compassion and justice as deacons, but we lead the church in that. And that's the difference. It's the leadership. Compassion and justice were not new words when they were added to the ordination ritual. They were always in the description of what deacons do. And I think it's really important that it's both compassion and justice. It's so easy to get involved in a lot of charity work, which is compassionate, no question. But it's got to be more than that. We've got to do more than that. We've got to think in terms of how do we change those systems that cause situations where charity is needed. And so every deacon needs to always be thinking both ways. First, you meet those immediate needs compassionately, and then you think about the systems and how we change them to make them more right. There's also just the simple thing of it really clarifying identity about deacons being different from elders. The responsibility of elders is for order and sacrament, and the responsibility of deacons is for compassion and justice. So that it clarifies distinction. Even if you look as though, as a deacon, you're doing things that elders do, which I did a lot of that when I served in the church. I helped to lead worship. I organized committee meetings. I did reports for the charge conference. I did all those things. But my starting point and commitments were always beyond that to the compassion and justice aspect of ministry. If you're organizing a Christian education program, which is what I was doing, I was thinking about meeting people where they are. And that's the compassion half of it. But the justice half was, and who are we not serving here? And how do we make this, even this within the church, a more just program that invites all with a variety of points of view and a variety of needs and a variety of developmental levels fully into our Christian education and our Christian formation program. So adding compassion and justice, I think, was a wonderful clarifying move on the part of the General Conference.
And what do you see in store for deacons in the future?
You know, I'm always saying I envision that we should have about 10 times as many deacons as we have elders. There's no limit to how many deacons we have, and there's no limit to the needs of the world for these deacons. So we should be identifying people in our congregations. There are people in every congregation who could be potentially called to the order of deacons and to the work of compassion and justice in whatever they're doing. I think every elder should look at the congregation and identify 3 or 4 people and say to them, have you ever considered being a deacon? And would you be interested in exploring that? Here's some resources for it. Because if we did that, if we had 10 times as many deacons as we have elders, we would really be moving toward the kingdom of God in a most powerful way. I would love to see that. Maybe in my lifetime, probably not.
Great. All right, is there anything else that you would like to add as far as discerning calls go for people who are looking at the Order of Deacon, or any advice you would have for people who are discerning this call?
Well, we're still in a place where we have to be constantly teaching as well as just answering calls. So all of us are constantly trying to explain to all the rest of the church who we are and why we are that and why in the world we would be ordained to do that. But beyond that, and beyond all the difficulties that some people have trying to work their way through the candidacy process, you know, God keeps calling people, and people keep saying yes, and that is really exciting to me. And I just would say, find some other deacon somewhere and talk to them, and listen to God.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Crain. It's been enlightening. I know that there are several in our conference who don't know some of these stories, and will be able to learn a lot from this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you.